Welcome to the Black Anarchist Podcast, a channel where critical thinkers come to learn and grow. Through pedagogical discussions, we challenge the status quo, conventional narratives, and present raw truth. I'm JC, author of The Black State Project, The Path to Sovereignty, Reparations, and Rebuilding Black Wall Street. Today, we're going to discuss the assassination of Charlie Kirk from the perspective of an antinatalist and an anarchist. I held off from giving my opinion because I really wanted to gather my thoughts, and now I have decided the angle that I want to address this topic. Um, the main reason that I'm doing this is because I really want to expose the hypocrisy both on the left and the right, and these hypocrisies are so glaring that nobody else is saying it. So I decided I'm going to point it out. Um, Let me just start out by saying that I did not listen to Charlie Kirk. Um, I guess I listened to the surround thing where they had the discussion, with like 20 people against him or whatever. But I did not find Charlie Kirk to be that interesting. He was a provocateur. I think he was a shock jock who said things which I'm not sure if he actually believed them. He was a puppet for the state of Israel. And so I just wasn't impressed with Charlie Kirk. The things that trigger many people really didn't trigger me because I did not find him to be particularly uh, intelligent or entertaining. With that said, I guess I'm ambiguous when it comes to his assassination. I'm going to tell you why. Like, I just have a completely different perspective from most people. So, on September 10th, 2025, Charlie Kirk was assassinated at the Utah Valley University during his American Comeback Tour. Um, and so a lot of people are celebrating it. A lot of people are really trying to shame people, and the public backlash from the celebration of his assassination is. I mean, I think it's predictable, right? I already said this. Immediately, I said that they are immediately going to blame the left to say that the left is uniquely violent, and they're going to use this as an excuse to take away our guns, and they are going to use this to censor us. And so, I mean, I said it immediately before I even gave commentary. I knew this was going to happen. But here's the double standard, right? Because according to these people who are celebrating his death, right? The message that I took from it is that if you're a bad person, then you deserve to die. But if you're a good person who actually wants to die, then you don't deserve to die, right? So if you want medical assistance in dying, then you're not entitled to that as a right, as a natural right. In order to have the right to die, you actually have to be a complete asshole. And then people are going to celebrate your death. So what that tells me is that unless you are useful to society, unless some society can get something out of you, then they're you basically get to languish in perpetuity. You get to suffer and be miserable. But if you're a complete asshole, then all of a sudden, oh, now all of a sudden you support the right to die, right? Or you support. I'm not going to say the right to die. You support actual death. You become a pro mortalist all of a sudden when before you were not a pro mortalist. So, um, I think there's some glaring hypocrisies there. So in order for me to have the right to medical assistance in dying, I need to be a provocateur and be a complete asshole and be like Charlie Kirk, and then all of a sudden you're going to support it. Um, I mean, his death was, I mean, it was short. It didn't seem like he suffered. I Like I said, I don't really care about what he said politically. Um, what I'm going to expose is the hypocrisy, especially from those who consider themselves socialists, because your targets are always misplaced. You always focus on the people who are politically insignificant. You want to focus on the CEO of a healthcare firm. You want to focus on Charlie Kirk. You never focus on the people who actually have systemic power. And before I even go further, let me just say I'm not even sure that the alleged killer is the actual killer. Um, he's still innocent until proven guilty. This does seem like a false flag, that this was something that was trumped up in order to stir the pot, in order to infringe on our Second Amendment and First Amendment rights. But assuming, arguing though, let's say that this was the actual killer. That's the basis of this live stream. Let's say he was the killer. As an anti-natalist, right? My perspective is that everyone who has life imposed on them also has a death sentence imposed on them, right? So death is imposed on you from birth. So whether Charlie Kirk died from cancer, um, a heart attack, old age, some freak accident, it doesn't matter. Death was inevitable. He was going to die at some point. So whether he died at 31, which by the way, that was a hard 31. I'm still finding it hard to believe that he actually was 31. But whether he died at 31 or 81, the outcome was predetermined at birth, right? So that's why it's completely irrational to celebrate his death. Um, it's just as illogical to celebrate his death as it is illogical to celebrate his birth. I would lament his birth, and as someone who's compassionate, I would actually, not for the reason that you guys are celebrating his death. I would celebrate his death because it is liberation from this hellscape. I, death is not. I mean, death is not something that I lament. I look forward to death. I mean, I don't want to suffer, but I don't think that death is something that should be avoided. It is inevitable. It is a part of life, and this is something that Carl Jung addressed. That the modern Western culture pushes death out of their consciousness and treat it as something that happens to other people rather than accepting it as an integral part of existence, right? Because every time somebody dies, you never think, oh, it's going to be my turn next. You just think, oh, that happened to that person. Oh, I feel sorry for their family. Meanwhile, you're sitting here thinking that you're immortal, that it's not going to be your time at some point. Every time a celebrity dies, it's like, oh, that poor person. Oh, that person was so young. This person had their life to look forward to, right? And you sit there talking about it as if it happens in isolation, that it's not going to eventually happen to you. It Carl Jung actually calls this a neuroses, right? What did he say about it? That it is an integral part of life. So people have blocked it out. They have mentally blocked it out that everybody's life comes to a death sentence. Um, the hysteria around Charlie Kirk's death exemplifies what Jung identified as the psychological damage from death denial. You are denying that everybody has to die. So why would you celebrate somebody's death when you know he was going to have to die anyway? What you're not actually celebrating his death. What you're actually celebrating is the timing and the manner of his death, which is what society wants to control. When they try to deny people the right to die, they're not really avoiding death. What they are trying to do is control how you die and where you die. So that's what I'm saying. That's why it's so irrational that you're not actually pro-mortalist from a consequentialist or an ethical standpoint. You're pro-mortalist when it actually serves your interest, but if someone else wants to die, you're not going to afford them the liberty to decide their own deaths, which means you don't actually support the right to life. You cannot support the right to life if you don't support the right to death. Because as I've explained before, the right to life includes the right to disposal. If you own anything, you have the right to dispose of it. If you own a car, you can dispose of it. If you own a pair of shoes, you can dispose of it. But you don't actually own your life, which is why you don't have the right to die. So, Charlie Kirk did not own his life, and none of us own our lives. And the reason why you're celebrating is because well, whatever, a fragment of of society has collectively decided that Charlie Kirk's life did not serve the common good. That Charlie Kirk was an asshole; he deserved to die, and so you have just summarily decided that his life did not serve anybody. To you, um, I don't have a problem with that. I just think that you guys should be honest that that is essentially what you did. If my life does serve the public, if you think I'm a good person, you think that I'm paying my taxes and I'm advocating for the type of policies that you want, then you're going to say that I deserve to live even though I don't want to live. You're not going to afford me the right to medical assistance in dying. I should just languish in perpetuity. But someone like Charlie Kirk should. This is about control. I mean that's the underlining point that I'm trying to get at. That you guys are status, and statism is inherently violent. And I'm going to explain why the whole thing is completely hypocritical. Again, this is not about me defending Charlie Kirk. I don't give a shit about Charlie Kirk. This is, I mean, you guys are looking at, you're not looking at the big picture. You're looking at Charlie Kirk in a vacuum. There's going to be another Charlie Kirk in his wake or in his passing, right? There's going to be other assholes. You can assassinate all these people all you want, but you are creating these people. I mean, this is the thing that people don't understand. Everybody wants to throw their pitchforks at the monster when they are actually creating the monsters. I'm not sure how they created Charlie Clerk. Well, this whole capitalist system, this whole democratic system that you guys all support, you created Donald Trump. You created Charlie Kirk. You created all these assholes that you're now lamenting. And so, um, here's the hypocrisy, right? Because when Charlie Kirk was born, let's just give him credit. Let's say he was a cute little baby. You guys would have been celebrating that, right? Y'all would have been celebrating the fact that he was born. But then when he becomes an asshole, then all of a sudden you think that he deserves the death penalty, right? Without a jury trial. I understand that he did support the killing of George Floyd, but I'm going to get to that also. That the hypocrisy is still overwhelming. Okay, so these people are hardcore status. Their status both on the left and the right, but I'm talking specifically about those who are celebrating his death because um let me just say that what Charlie Kirk advocated wasn't just free speech. These were verbal acts. Um and I'm trying to let me just give y'all a quick explanation what verbal acts. Verbal acts are not just free speech. They're acts that are legally operative, like they have legal force behind them. Like Charlie Kirk was calling for, well, first of all, he supported the killing of George Floyd, which means that he supported state sanctioned violence. Um, he supported the ending of DEI, which, by the way, my opinion is completely different from most people's opinion when it comes to DEI and affirmative action. I take the position that occupational licenses are the dominant society's version of affirmative action, or accurately, I would call it negative action. That they have decided to give themselves privileges, that they're going to use the coercive power of the state to interfere with the free market, and it decisively uh, goes in their favor. That if the state is going to interfere with the free market and only give those who they deem to be competent the ability to earn a livelihood, then the state is essentially deciding winners and losers. So, um, Charlie Kirk was a hardcore status, which means that he actually was a violent person. Again, this wasn't just about free speech. This was about verbal acts, that he was basically calling on the state to engage in violence. All acts of government are violence because they're enforced through physical force or threat thereof. But here's the flip side of that. Most of you are statists too. Most of you support vaccine mandates. You support occupational licenses. You support reproductive coercion. You don't think that women should have the right to get abortion. So you're going to force women to have children against their will. You're against LGBT rights, right? In Africa, when they're trying to impose the death penalty on the LGBT community, many of you have done videos actually celebrating and championing the disenfranchisement of African people. So you are status. You're just as violent as Charlie Kirk. You just don't. You think that the authoritarian policies only are coming from or emanating from the right. No, you're just as authoritarian as the right. You're just as oppressive, right? I'm not going to say that any side has a monopoly on authoritarian practices. You're both fascist as hell, and you both have made many people's lives a living hell. You have destroyed the quality of people's lives, and then when they decided they don't want to be here, you're going to force them to be here against their will, so that they can be subjected to the um, the consequences of your policies, right? Because you can talk about Donald Trump, you can do that. Some of us were miserable long before Donald Trump. Some of us were being oppressed long before Donald Trump. Some of us were oppressed under. It's not even about Obama. It's not even about any president. Some of us were oppressed under state and local policies. I told y'all that the state has far more power politically than the federal government because the state has political general police powers. But you guys want to focus on the president. You want to focus on national policies while completely um, dropping the ball when it comes to local policies. So I think that you're completely politically misguided. And so this is the reason why you get the result that Charlie Kirk is on your radar. You're not even focused on people who actually have a direct impact on your daily lives. You're focused on Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk. Um, I'm not even going to address Donald Trump right now, but Charlie Kirk is completely irrelevant politically, other than the fact that he was calling for state sanctioned violence, but it's not like he actually wielded any actual power. What Charlie Kirk was useful in the sense that he was manufacturing consent for government violence, right? He was supporting Israel. He was supporting oppressive policies, but it's not like he actually wielded the power. So you guys are going to go after you're going after low hanging fruit, is what I'm saying. You're not even going after. I mean, I would respect you more if you were actually going after the people who actually wielded power. But you go after the low hanging fruit, and I don't respect it. I don't. Um, what was that guy's name? I'm trying to think of his name. Diabra Redding, the guy who jumped over the bench and attacked that judge. There was no outcrying in support of him, and I actually respect him. I'm probably one of the few people who actually did a video actually championing him as a hero because he actually went after a judge, someone who actually has some systemic power, someone who actually was a direct threat to his life. But you guys, you don't support Diabra Redding. You support um, that Luigi guy, the one who killed the healthcare CEO. Why? Because you guys are misguided. You think that a healthcare organization is what? They're responsible for the death of those who are denied access to healthcare. You're still not getting the big picture. The only reason that these healthcare organizations have power to make life and death decisions is because the government has given them a monopoly over the practice of medicine. So the government has deprive you of access to medical care because they have driven up the cost of medical services by giving these organizations and medical professionals in general a monopoly over the practice of medicine. But no, you're not going to advocate for a free market. No, you're going to support government regulations which drive up the cost and give healthcare organizations a monopoly over the practice of medicine. And then what you're going to say is we're going to you should just give your services away below cost or whatever. The whole thing is you don't understand it's because of the lack of a free market that you don't have access to it. So you want government control, but you want government control in the way that you want. You want the government to monopolize the practice of medicine and then make it accessible and then at the same time regulate the cost of those services. So that shit is completely hypocritical. Let me make sure y'all can hear me because I'm who's here? Okay, good. So y'all can hear me. Completely hypocritical. Um you're not going. This is what I'm trying to tell y'all. You guys, this is the reason why you guys are advocating for cash reparations, by the way. over sovereignty. When I talk about sovereignty, nobody gives a shit. You want some damn cash reparations. You want somebody to actually send you a check in the mail, and then you can remain under a perpetual state of oppression because you're not actually interested in liberation. You don't want to be sovereign. You don't actually want to create your own public policies and actually have self determination. You want to sit in your ass and have a check mailed to you, and then you want to remain under the same system. You don't actually give a shit about liberating anybody. You support this status oppressive ass system, and so you're complicit. You're absolutely complicit. And when the U.S. economy collapses and the U.S. dollar crumbles, you absolutely deserve all the natural consequences of your status, uh, your supportive statism, right? Because I've also explained that. I was also did a live stream explaining that the U.S. was going to collapse. I actually did that like 3 years ago, and I did a more recent video a few months ago explaining how the U.S. dollar was going to collapse and how the U.S. dollar is not money; it's actually currency. It only has value because it is imposed on people through threat of physical force. That is the reason why we have all these foreign wars, so that the U.S. dollar reigns supreme. And I explained this in great detail. Very few people listen to that live stream, and so you guys can remain. I'm not talking about you guys specifically. I'm talking about Americans in general. The American people can remain perpetually ignorant, and then when the consequences of their ignorance happen to or fall on them, then they're going to act like they're innocent. Like, no, you brought this shit on yourself. You didn't want to be self-sufficient. You didn't want to have a self um, sustaining local economy where you actually have to grow your own vegetables and produce your own goods. No, you wanted to exploit the third world, and then you think the third world is going to have some empathy for you. No, you supported this shit. So this is the chickens coming home to roost. The U.S. economy is going to collapse. Um, all this shit that that's going on right now, this Charlie Kirk bullshit, these are distractions. Your guys are not focusing on the big picture. The fact that it works so effectively is really disappointing, but it's also predictable. Um, these are just red herrings. It's just look over here, look over there, and you guys look wherever they tell you to look. This is the reason why I don't even like covering topics like this. By the way, I could talk about Charlie Kirk in a traditional way, just to get views, but I don't get anything out of it. So I know that the type of content I do is boring, but just to follow the trends, whatever's trending, and just talk about that, I just think it's really low hanging fruit, and it really does not lead to anybody's liberation. So I'm only talking about Charlie Kirk because I want to get a point across that you guys have fought. You have drinking the Kool-Aid. You have fallen for the okie doke. Charlie Kirk is not. He's not a main player, right? He's not. I don't even think Trump is a main player. You really need to. Trump. You think that Trump is the most powerful person in the world? You're out your damn mind. Trump is a fucking puppet, just like all these politicians. Who's controlling Trump, right? Even when you even if you're not going to go so far as to look behind the curtain to look at these shadow governments, which JFK actually did a whole speech about shadow societies before he was taken out. So they do exist. We have evidence that they exist. This is not a conspiracy theory. They do exist. Donald Trump is not running shit. Um, but even when you don't go behind the curtain, even just within the political system that you see in front of you, even within that political framework, Donald Trump still isn't running shit. Um, Politically, the Supreme Court has far more power, and not just the Supreme Court, but the judiciary in its totality. Federal courts have far more power than than the president or any other political actor because they have the final say when they're interpreting constitutional law. They have the last say on all legal issues. You guys never focus on federal judges or the Supreme Court. You guys always want to go after the low hanging fruit, which is Donald Trump. Donald Trump only has power because the Supreme Court has given him that power. Um, not even that they necessarily gave it to him, but they have given legitimacy to his power. They have created presidential immunity. This is not nowhere in the Constitution, but also judicial immunity, also qualified immunity, right? You guys are not going to focus on the real power players. You're going to focus on the low hanging fruit, those who are visible. You're not going to actually take the time to understand how this political system works. Um, and so I just don't respect it. Now let's see, where was I? Right. So this is the thing. I'm not against political violence, by the way. This is something that John Jacques Rousseau said, that any revolution is going to come through tumult. There needs to be some type of violence. There needs to be some type of political upheaval. That is the only way you're going to get any real systemic change. So I'm not against it. My critique is that it's never targeted. That it's always some random low hanging fruit. It's never anything that's going to be meaningful. Again, I think that the killing of Charlie Kirk is probably a false flag. I probably, I mean, it's too early to form a solid opinion, but I'm pretty sure that the state of Israel has something to do with it. I don't think that this was a lone actor who did this of his own volition. Um, there's always a bigger picture behind it, especially when they, what did Rahm Emanuel say? He said that never let a good tragedy go to waste. So they're going to exploit this tragedy, if you want to call it that. And they're going to weaponize it to take away your gun rights, your First Amendment rights. You're not going to be able to criticize Israel. Um, and the problem is that when they implement these policies, you guys are not going to do shit about it. I mean, it's not as if it's not as if I'm going to do anything about it either, because I have tried to do things on other issues and nobody gave a shit. So I have really, jumped out front to take the first bullets and had my life destroyed. So I would do it if I thought that people actually gave a shit and they were actually going to, but you're not. You're not. So if there was a movement that was respectable, I really wish the not fucking around coalition was local, because I would support that. People have made critiques about that, but that seems like it's, at least on the surface, it seems like a real grassroots organization. A lot of shit is not grassroots. This fucking anonymous bullshit, it's all fake. It's all fake. It's all some George Soros bullshit. There's not going to be any pushback. You guys didn't push back against COVID, right? The vaccinations, you all supported that shit, and you wanted it to be mandatory. You wanted to destroy people's livelihood, that they don't have a right to work unless they get vaccinated, unless they have a biological agent injected into their system. You supported that shit. You didn't think that they had the right to travel. So you were willing to destroy people's lives. You were willing to have people forcibly vaccinated at gunpoint, essentially. And you think you're not a fucking violent pig? You are. You're just as violent as Charlie Kirk. It doesn't matter that you're not the one who's actually pulling the trigger. You're engaging in verbal acts. You are engaging. Well, you first of all, you support democracy, which democracy is inherently violent. The interesting thing about this is that there are commenters right now who are blaming anarchists for the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and I think it's actually ridiculous. Um, because they always scapegoat anarchists, right? They always want to say, "Oh, anarchists are so violent," and many of these people are not even anarchists. Many people. Well, first of all, I think it's a false flag, but many of these people are traditional socialists. They're not even anarchists, because again, an anarchist would not go after the low hanging fruit. They would not go after Charlie Kirk. They would not go after Donald Trump. They would go after the real actors and power players. Um, so let's just go down the list. May 4th, 1886, a labor demonstration in Chicago's Hayman's Square Market for a 8-hour workday. Um, During this event, an unknown person threw dynamite at police. Several police officers and at least 4 civilians died. Um, Anarchists were scapegoated. 8 anarchists were convicted of murder on conspiracy grounds, even though they weren't present, and their involvement was never proved. There became a mass hysteria around anarchists. 4 people were hanged. 1 committed suicide. Um, Entire immigrant communities, particularly Germans and Bohemians, came under suspicion, created a template for future anarchist scapegoating. Um, they always blame anarchists for everything. And it's almost like the anarchists are like the boogeyman because you don't actually know any anarchists. You've never engaged with an anarchist. It's just some phantom, scary person who's what you. No, we're not the violent ones. You are the violent ones. You are the violent status, and we should be afraid of you, not the other way around. In 1901, the McKinney assassination. Leon Koljitz, a Polish American factory worker, shot President McKinley at the Pan American explosion in Buffalo. McKinney died September 4th, 1901. Um, Several anarchists, including Emma Goldman, were briefly arrested despite no evidence of conspiracy. They were eventually determined. It was eventually determined that he acted alone. In 1903, the Alien Immigration Act, um, which is actually the Anarchist Exclusion Act, targeted foreign-born anarchists, denying entry and allowing indefinite deportation. Post 9/11, anarchists as convenient targets. After 9/11, countless people saw rights stripped away due to due process rights rolled back and surveillance entrenched in daily life. The FBI targeted cities with surveillance, high-tech cameras, cell phone monitoring, targeting of activist organizations. Despite anarchists having nothing to do with 9/11, they became targets of expanded surveillance. And assuming that Al Qaeda actually was responsible for September 11th, Al Qaeda is ideologically opposed to anarchy. Emma Goldman specifically was targeted, that they specifically blamed her for the McKinley assassination, um, which she wrote about at length. There were mass arrests. Emma Goldman was arrested along with Isaac Havel and 10 other anarchists. Here's a quote from Emma Goldman: that every act of political violence should nowadays be attributed to anarchists is not at all surprising, yet it is a fact known to almost everyone familiar with the anarchist movement that a great number of acts for which anarchists had to suffer either originated with the capitalist press or were instigated, if not directly perpetuated, by the police. Um, the reason why anarchists are blamed a lot of times is because we don't have a central organization, right? There's no central organization the way these other, you guys all corral around a central leader, and so um anarchists are difficult to define because you don't know who's an anarchist because we're not politically engaged. I did vote, but I'm not going to be doing that in the future. We don't vote. We don't politically. We don't engage in politics. We believe in direct action and mutual aid. Um, and so you don't know who's an anarchist, right? The anarchists are just a bunch of boogeymen. The word anarchy sounds scary to the general public. It requires no explanation. We get blamed for all the violence, even though the violence is actually being carried out by statists. So with the Charlie Kirk case, within hours, commenters began blaming anarchists. Right? There were no anarchist symbols, manifestos, group claims, or ideological symbols that were traced back to anarchy. Nothing. It's just, oh, there's violence. It must be anarchist. No. The reason why a statist is more likely to be the culprit is because you guys believe in this system. You think that the system has failed. You think that getting rid of Charlie Kirk or getting rid of Donald Trump is going to actually solve your problems. This is not what anarchists believe. We believe that the problem is the system itself. So you can get rid of one or two bad actors, and the system is going to remain in place. This is not the handiwork of anarchists. This feels like a false flag. How did someone get so close at a public university event? Um, Convenient arrest after initial manhunt, right? Perfect story for right wing victimization. These right wingers are portraying themselves as victims. Oh, we're so helpless. The left is so violent. We're so innocent. No, you are violent actors, right? You have called on the state to inflict violence against your own people. You support the state of Israel. You support forcing women to have children against their will. You support occupational licenses. You are a violent bitch. And I don't respect. It's not that the right is uniquely violent, but they're definitely not. They're definitely not victims. They are definitely guilty. They are definitely. I guess there are no victims under democracy, right? If you support democracy, then whatever the government does is completely your fault. So by that logic and by that extension, whatever happens that the U.S. is engaged in or supporting the genocide of those in Palestine, you have blood on your hands. You have blood on your hands no matter how you look at it. You support the police who are going around killing innocent people. It makes you feel safe to have the state controlling everything because you don't actually believe in self-determination. And this is the reason why I'm calling for the Black State Project, by the way, because I realize how this system works. Nobody else seems to recognize it. And I actually Googled it. Has anyone ever come up with the idea of the Black State Project before me, other than Edward McCabe, who tried to do it in the early 1900s in Oklahoma? Nobody else has ever concocted this idea. I Googled it. There were no search results other than what I have postulated through my pamphlet and my YouTube videos. Nobody else has ever proposed this, which means you don't actually care about liberation. You support this shit. You guys are just as capitalist and just as statist as anybody else. So look at the outcome. Now they're proposing gun control, right? This is so crazy because the right never supported um so-called common sense gun laws, right? There's no such thing as common sense gun laws. That's bullshit. The Second Amendment is absolute, and you guys are curtailing our absolute right to Second Amendment, which leaves us completely vulnerable to the state. You guys will say, oh, if you're not in the military, why do you need an AR-15? Oh, how are we going to defend ourselves against the government? I told y'all the definition of government. The government is the monopoly of physical force. So you're going to take away our guns and actually give the government a monopoly on the use of physical force and leave us helpless, defenseless victims. I don't know how you can defend this morally. Um, you can look at all these events in history, look at what happened in Germany when they took away people's guns and then they were just helpless victims being rounded up and thrown in camps. Um, the right to defend yourself is an inalienable right, and I don't think I should be relegated to relying on the government to defend me. The government is my oppressor. I need to defend myself from the government. The Second Amendment was about the right to form private militias. There was no standing police force or standing military. When there was a war, they had to form Minutemen. The Minutemen slash private citizens were the military. So the right to the Amendment right to bear arms is really about private militias. It's not about you got the way you guys frame it is the government has absolute authority, and then you guys need to work backwards to prove that you have rights. I told you all about how the Ninth Amendment works. That we retain all the rights that we had under common law. So the Constitution does not create rights. It only enumerates certain rights which existed under common law, but it is not exhaustive, right? But you guys have completely turned it on its head where the government has absolute authority. The government can have all the arms that it wants, but if you want to bear arms, you need to beg for the government's permission. This is what I'm trying to tell you. You guys deserve this shit. You brought this shit on yourselves, right? And when the government does implement martial law, you have no one to blame but your fucking self. And I'm going to be sitting back eating popcorn. I'm going to be sitting here. Um, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm not trying to be cruel, but the writing was on the wall, and some of us have been trying to warn you guys for a long time, and you guys didn't listen. You didn't give a shit. It was fine when other people were being oppressed, as long as it wasn't at your doorstep. You didn't give a shit. So, this is chickens coming home to roost, and I'm sure I'm going to lose subscribers over this. I don't really give a shit. The right is just as violent as the left. But you're both status, right? I don't see any difference. Maybe there's a slight difference when it comes to public policy, but gosh, you guys are just as oppressive. I don't see any distinction. The distinction is between the statist and the anti-statist. So it doesn't matter what your public policies are. You are oppressive on both sides. And if Kamala Harris would have won, Kamala Harris would have been just as oppressive in completely different ways. But the bottom line, you're looking at the individual actors. You're not looking at the system as a collective. The system itself is oppressive. And this is the problem that I have with traditional socialists, that you want to go after individual actors. Donald Trump, you want to go after a CEO, you want to go after Charlie Kirk. You don't actually want to address the system itself. So let me see if there's anybody still here. I'm sure I already lost people. Any comments? They want the benefits from the state that were given as a compromise to appease the workers from power and support the war. Right, your money supports the war. Like you not understand that everything. This is the reason why when Bin Laden allegedly attacked America, he didn't just blame the state. He blamed the people. Because under democracy, you are responsible for whatever your state does, whatever your government does. You have blood on your hands. Right. I don't know why they always do this. They always blame anarchists. And the anarchists had nothing to do with it. The main reason is because anarchists are not visible, right? We don't actually defend ourselves. You don't even know who actually is an anarchist, right? You think that the anarchists are just a boogeyman that I mean, who is an anarchist, right? What violence have anarchists actually inflicted on anyone? Let me see if there are any other comments. All right, y'all. I guess I am pretty much done. That is my rant for today. Um, I just think it's political theater to be outraged, or it's really political theater to have an opinion one way or the other about his death, because death is a part of life. So it's not. I mean, there's nothing surprising about the fact that he died. He was going to have to die at some point. We all have to die at some point. You just want to control the time and the manner of his death, which makes you a sadistic status. Um, make sure I didn't leave anything out. All right, y'all. I guess I am going to end this live stream. Thank you for listening to the Black Anarchist podcast. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. The struggle is real, and the fight for liberation is far from over. Get sovereign or die trying.